Hello, and welcome to Denton's Tales. You know, you would think that getting a wall built would be a pretty normal and easy thing to do. I mean, it happens all the time, after all. Has done for thousands of years. Small walls for little houses, large walls for castles, even larger ones across entire countries, like in China or Hadrian's Wall in the north of Britain. So, building walls was never really a problem, right? Hmm. Well, not always. There have been walls that were less than popular. The one across Berlin, for example. And I'm going to talk about one that was, well, very far from your usual, normal, everyday wall, both in its purpose, its construction, and in its aftermath. And that was the Åsgard Wall. Now, Åsgard, or Asgard in English, was the home of the Old Norse gods. Yes, Åsgard, not Valhalla, contrary to popular opinion. For one thing, there was no such place as Valhalla. That term wasn't even used until 1768. To the Old Norse, it was Valhall, meaning the hall of the warriors slain in battle, which comes from Val, which meant one killed in battle. It was quite a specific term, and hall, meaning a hall. And it was simply a building in Åsgard. Now, one of many halls, so a very important one. But the gods didn't live there. It was Odin's hall for the Einherjar, the once fighters. Those warriors killed in battle, where they would feast and drink and fight and carouse as they waited for the great battle that would end the world, Ragnarok. But the gods lived elsewhere. They had their own halls in Åsgard. Though I suppose they probably spent a lot of time in Valhall, even if a lot of it was lying on the floor unconscious from an over imbibing of mead or ale. So, the home of the gods was Åsgard. Got it? Good. Now, we shall proceed. To begin with, it was a collection of various buildings. Åsgard was rather like a fancy village or a small town, you might say. But that meant it was not very easily defended. It had no fortifications. It was wide open. A wall that had surrounded it having been destroyed early on during the war that took place between the gods. And for protection it relied on Thor and his mighty hammer, Mjolnir. Now, that was fine. Thor could pretty much, well, bash anything that might threaten Åsgard into mush with Mjolnir. But he was also the protector of Midgard, the realm of humans, and even Thor, great god that he was, couldn't really be in two places at the same time, which meant that there might be times when Åsgard would be left unprotected. And then there were the Jotnar, or giants, to consider. Jotun being the singular. Now, the Norse giants, they were not huge, like the Jack and the Beanstalk idea of a giant in fairy stories or the giants in Game of Thrones. No, they weren't really any larger than anyone else for the most part. And Jotun comes from a word meaning to eat, to consume. So rather than thinking of them as actual giants, fee, fi, fo, form, I smell the blood of an Englishman, not that kind of giant, it might be better to see them as being, well, big eaters, gluttons perhaps, maybe a bit overweight. But the Jotnar were not always friendly or to be trusted, though some of the gods were actually Jotnar themselves, Tyr, Loki, and Hel, for example. And Jotun Skadi became a god when she married Njord. But despite intermarriage and frequent good relations between gods and Jotnar later on, to begin with, there were those among the Jotnar who were seen as very, very dangerous. And they might not be very trustworthy, they might take advantage of an undefended Åsgard. So it was decided that a new wall was needed. But defensive wall building, well, I mean, that wasn't a skill that the gods themselves actually possessed. And obviously, they needed a strong, proper wall. So who was going to build it? Let me see. Well, that issue was solved when they engaged the services of a builder, a mason, who had offered himself to construct it for them, which was very convenient, really. Just what they needed. But when the thing looks too good to be true, the chances are that it isn't true. And unknown to the gods, the friendly builder who had offered his services was actually, surprise, surprise, Jotun himself. They hadn't seen that one coming. Just coincidence, or could he have an ulterior motive? We shall see. Now he agreed to build the wall, but he had a condition. Along with what they were going to pay him, he wanted the goddess Freya as part of the payment. A little goodwill bonus, you might say. Needless to say, Freya wasn't overly chuffed about that one. The wall would be great, but being included in the payment for it, well, that didn't do very much for her frame of mind. Now, I mean, she was, of course, very fond of all things romantic. She enjoyed love poems. She was not slow to bestow her, shall we say, intimate favours, but she did like to choose who she was intimate with, as one would, of course, I suppose. And being regarded as an intimate part payment for a wall, well, that did not exactly arouse her sexual desires. Odin would have had none of that. The builder would have got his marching orders, but Loki stepped in, and Loki had a plan. A devious plan. Well, this was Loki after all. A word in your ear, Odin. Why not agree to his terms, but set conditions he can't possibly meet? He's lusting for Freya. His eyes are almost popping out of his head when he looks at her, so he'll agree without thinking. Then, when he fails to meet the conditions, you don't have to pay him. You get a mostly built wall for free. We can finish it, and Freya won't have to do it with him. Odin liked the sound of that. Now, he wasn't averse to a bit of underhand dealing himself at times, and of course Freya wholeheartedly agreed with Loki. She would have agreed with anything that meant she didn't have to shack up with the lusting builder. So Odin agreed with the builder's demand, but he set a condition. There would be a time limit on the job. It must be finished in 3 seasons, and he could not have any assistance from anyone else while he did it, or the contract would be null and void. Now, such a task would obviously be impossible to finish in that time, especially by one man not having any help. And Odin must have held his breath in suspense, wondering if the builder would spot the trick. But no, the condition was accepted without any protest. He really wanted Freya. Oh yes. So Odin was delighted. He would get most of the wall built for free. Loki had saved the day. Freya breathed a sigh of relief. However, it soon became apparent that the builder's lust for Freya may not have been the reason for his unquestioning acceptance of the terms he knew, on the face of it, were impossible to meet. Since carrying the stone, required by himself was clearly not possible, he asked if he could use his horse to haul it. Well, that seemed a reasonable request. It didn't involve anyone else helping him. I mean, it was a horse, after all. So Odin agreed. Now the horse duly arrived. A huge, magnificent stallion named Svadilfari, which, surprise, surprise, possessed magic power, making it enormously strong and powerful, the equivalent of a whole team of normal horses, and it began hauling such large loads of stone that the wall would almost certainly be finished well on time. Well, the gods hadn't seen that one coming, and I'm sure Freya was probably looking for a chastity belt. Odin was in a dilemma. He still wanted the wall built, but now he had no intention of keeping his end of the bargain, and he began looking for some way out of the arrangement. Odin wasn't always exactly too impressive in the strict honesty and proper behavior department. Maybe that's why Loki fitted in as well as he did. But simply breaking his word, that wasn't really a good idea. He really couldn't do that. He was the chief of the gods. He couldn't be seen to just break his word willy-nilly. But then he thought, Loki, yes, who better to scupper the arrangement with the builder than Loki? He had, after all, been the one who had talked Odin into it in the first place. So he was given the job of seeing to it that the wall wasn't finished on time, with not very subtle hints as to very unpleasant things that might happen to him if he failed in the task. But Loki, as always, came up with a plan. The damn stallion It obviously had to be got out of the way. He was still hauling massive supplies of stone at a prodigious rate. Stone was piling up all over the place. And oddly enough, the builder himself seemed unusually strong, and he was getting the wall up at a commendable yet very disturbing speed. As the building work was nearing the dreaded finish, almost built, Loki put his plan into action. And what a plan it was. As Svartalfari was hauling up another massive load, a beautiful mare appeared. A magnificent mare, and presumably a mare in heat as well. And she trotted around Svartalfari, flicking her tail sort of thing and fluttering her eyelashes. Horses have very long eyelashes, you know, and they flutter very, very well, actually. And yes, the mare was none other than the shape-shifting Loki. Good old Loki. Now, he, or rather she, or he, she, or whatever he was, it, perhaps, these videos are not meant for children, is being, well, available, shall we say. Oh, yes, very available. And once he, she, whatever, had Svartalfari's attention, disappeared off into the woods, with the now very aroused stallion in hot pursuit, panting breathlessly, and neither of them making a reappearance, for some reason, which we shall now draw a veil over. And that was the last that was seen of either of them. Now, no more massive loads of stone. The building work ground to a snail's pace, as the builder had to fetch the stone himself, and even his great strength wasn't great enough for that. The conditions of the agreement were not met. There was still part of the wall unfinished, nor could it now be finished without Svartalfari. And Troya breathed a sigh of relief. Odin could now back out of the agreement with total legality on his side, despite it being a very, very well illegal legality, since it was contrived to provide a reason to break the agreement. As it turned out, however, Odin discovered another reason to break the contract. A genuinely legal one this time. The builder had lied. Oh yes, he'd been telling porky pies. He was working under false pretenses. He was himself a Jotun. Yes, a giant building a wall to keep out giants. Now, Thor dealt with this new development in a quick and decisive manner. He was usually very quick and decisive by bashing the builder's head into mush with his great hammer, Mjolnir. Problem with the builder was solved. But where was Loki, for that matter? Where was Svartalfari? Now, this is the delicate bit. Fake horse Loki and genuine horse Svartalfari had been making, how shall I put this? How shall I put this delicately? Making the most of their time together. They were very friendly. Yes, very friendly. The result being that horse Loki became pregnant, spent the next 11 months still as a mare, the horse gestation period being 11 months, and then she, whatever, gave birth to a foal, which, oddly enough, had 8 legs, which he named Sleipnir, meaning slippy or the slipper, as it was very, very fast. But what happened to Svartalfari? Did he stick around for the birth? Did he do the sadly rather frequent male thing of, oh, I love you madly, darling, I can't live without you? What? You're pregnant. Oh, sorry. I just remembered an urgent appointment somewhere else. Goodbye. And leave? Well, I don't really know. He just sort of vanishes there from the story. But after 11 months, Loki, now himself again, arrived at Asgarda with Sleipnir in tow, which he presented to Odin. I can only imagine the conversation. Oh, Loki, how nice of you to join us again. We were getting worried about you. Not much, but still worried. Where have you been for the last 11 months? Do you know the gestation period for a horse, Odin? 11 months. I've spent that time lugging this around, and now it's here, and I'm giving it to you. What is that thing supposed to be? Well, it's the result of me as a horse getting friendly, you might say. Very friendly with a horse. Svartalfari, actually. And it looks like a horse, it smells like a horse, and it makes horse noises. So I think it's probably a horse. So That mare was you? Well done, but that has 8 legs, Loki. I had noticed that, Odin, especially while I was giving birth to it. Women are so fortunate that their babies have only 2. I thought the damn thing would never come out. Anyway, it's the fastest horse that ever existed. It can run on water or in the air, just the same as it does on land, and it is now yours. You are now, thanks to me, of course, the owner of a magic 8-legged horse. Congratulations. By the way, what happened to the builder? Oh, the builder. He could not finish on time. His horse ran away, it seems. Oh, what a shame. but it didn't matter in the end. It turned out to be a Jotun. So Thor bashed his head in with that lovely hammer you gave him. It was very amusing. Amusing to you, maybe, but I had to be a pregnant horse for 11 months. For nothing, as it turns out. Yes, and that's even more amusing. Charming story. Hans Christian Andersen couldn't have done better. One interesting aspect of all of that is Odin's attitude to masculinity. Not only did he quite happily practice the normally female magic art of Seder, taught him at his own request by Freya, and causing him to be accused of being ergi, or in other words, effeminate, but he seemed to have no problem with Loki having shifted into a female form and having sex with a male, even if they were horses at the time, and he was also quite happy to accept the resulting child of that union, Sleipnir. Rather laughably, it was actually Loki who later on would accuse Odin of being ergi, thanks to his practice of Seder, which, given his own crossover sexual activities with a horse, would seem to make him the last one to bring up that subject. Unless, of course, you would say that, he was a horse himself at the time. That was well, anyway, we won't get into that one. There we leave the tale of the Osgarda Wall, and one of Loki's shape-shifting escapades, of which he had several. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, well, please leave a like, share, and I shall see you in the next video. Until then, I shall say farewell, goodbye for now.